Hey there everybody, just thought I'd do a video about planning ahead when you're starting from scratch. So I'm about to set about making a whole load of buildings, but I just wanted to give you a little insight into how to go about doing this kind of thing. And it starts off with lots of scribbly rubbish drawings, I'm afraid. As you can see, none of these drawings are particularly amazing. But it's just key concepts, so sort of how tower blocks are going to slot together, showing interiors, working out three-dimensional spaces, working out how I want things to slot together, sort of interesting curves and how to build in balconies, how you're going to gain access to the central areas. I've been really interested in building buildings which have direct access to central areas through windows. Also taking into account things like size of bases, but also sort of how are you going to make these buildings which stretch to infinity. I'd really like at some point to be making some sort of, I don't want to push out boat out too far, but I mean 20 or 30 story buildings would be good to make, but you'd be looking at they'd stand 4 foot tall, so maybe that's a really bad idea. But certainly something that is the bottom end, so sort of in this sort of drawing it's just showing like, oh, what kind of formation would you have at the foot of a very large tower block, and working out how buildings actually mesh together. So yeah, I just thought I'd go through some of this with you. So these are just really scrawly ideas, they're not really important. This is terribly dull, but it's just using square paper. Square paper is really useful, especially if you want to just quickly map out, oh, I want so many inches by so many inches. And this is actually upside down, but just showing how areas where there'll be walls. Rough plans. So a plan drawing is a drawing where you show each floor has a plan. So this is balconies, and then there's doorways. I'm using a sort of basic architectural iconography. Not properly, I might add, because I'm not doing things like taking into account depth of walls and that. I do that later. This is working out elevations of steps and stairwells. I'm trying to build stairwells so that you have so many steps, and then you have a platform so you have somewhere to put a miniature. But then I'm also trying to make it so that you'll be able to fit a miniature on a step, because the base will actually slot underneath the step, so you can still have narrow steps and the bases will slot into place, and so you can have characters part way up a stairwell. So yeah, then also take into account you've only got a 4 foot by 4 foot playing area. How much space do your buildings actually take up? How much space do you want them to take up? And then looking at mission scenarios, where do you actually need buildings? Where do you need line of cover? How are you going to have elevation changes? I mean, this is a game that's very much about having a lot of different height to terrain, both in terms of elevations that you can be stood on and underneath. I mean, yeah, like you see, it's just scribbly. It's just working out areas. So if this square here was a building, and then you've got a stairwell coming up, this is roughly in, I normally make a note of how big I've got a square on any given page. So if this is claiming 12 inches, I think this is 1 square to 2 inches, so this would actually be like a really big structure. I was working out whether you could have sort of elevations with channels, so that you could have sort of river networks running through cityscapes. And we'll probably see something based on that kind of stuff. Again, upside down. This I keep handy because this is one of my careful no, it's a calculation. Basically, I wanted to be able to fit 1 inch of elevation into 1 inch of space. And I convert all this to millimeters later. It's just that I'm working on a convention of 3 inches for an elevation. So 1 story building is 3 inches tall. And this gives me a way where I can just go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 inches roughly gives me 2 inches of elevation. Up here, these are spiral staircases, where I've calculated the space required to have 1.5 inch, which I'm just going to grab a tape, sorry, reaching across. So 1.5 inch is roughly 40, well, it's just under 40 mil. But I've also done calculations later for stairwells, and then we start to get onto a sort of after I've worked out rough proportions, ideas, and all of these are conversion ratios, they don't matter for the moment, I'll explain more about them in a bit. But here, so I've got what I'm calling an H block because I've based it on an H shape, and then everything else is hung off of that. And this is the hab block, so I'm going to build first. Hopefully you'll be able to see them by now, but they are habitation blocks. They're based on minimal room dimensions, so I'm only actually allowing 2-inch depth on the width of a room. I'm only doing 2 rooms. But if you think about it, that's like a 12-foot by 18-foot room, 2 12-foot by 18-foot rooms. I've even been thinking I might put in a little WC in the corner, so it's sort of a living room, bedroom, or an ensuite in the corner. But I think on the initial builds I'm not going to be doing that, but maybe in future I will separately build sort of little ensuites and insert them into the rooms, because I'd quite like it if I could outfit all of these rooms with sort of little sofas and kitchens and what have you. I really want it to look like an actual city, hence I've designed these so they're 2 flats. On the ground floor they've got enough parking for 4 flats. Each floor there's 2 flats, and the flats have got like a living room and a main room, and then the window at the back will exit onto a fire escape, so the back side's got a sort of ladder and balcony fire escape system, so you can enter through the back of the building or you can enter through the front of the building, which is sort of a lift shaft which has a way out onto the top of the building. So this is sort of, if you like, it's compressing something which ideally would be a much taller structure with sort of, I don't know, a dozen flats in it, which would be extended longer. Each flat also has a balcony, I decided in the end, because there's you have to decide between gameplay purposes and realism and get the balance right. So these balconies designed so that 45mm base will fit on them. 2 inches deep gives enough space. I mean, you might even be able to squeeze like a tag on, but I don't see any reason for a tag to go up there unless they've got sort of super jump ability or what have you. So these hab blocks are sort of really line of sight blocking, somewhere to hide a sniper, because if you... Okay, I didn't mention elevations. So you get plans here. These are elevations. Elevations means you draw the sort of the side-on view. So if your building is here and you're looking at it, you're drawing this face of the building, and you draw every face. I haven't drawn multiples of these because I know that if I flip it, then I've got the other side. This all gets refined later. And then sort of, as you can see, just working different ideas, different forms, how they sit together. This was how I worked out the 20cm by 20cm objective room that you need for the weapons room, and I decided to turn this into a tower block. So this then, I worked out, this is the ground floor and then there's the next floor, and I sort of worked out the proportions, the dimensions, how everything will mesh together, and then moved into sort of drawing rough sort of pseudo 3D elevations, because they have a sort of 45-degree aspect. This is a true elevation, but it's taken because of the funny angles on the building. You can see faces and it becomes very awkward to read. Yeah, so then just sort of coming up with ideas for building elevated roadways, working out angles. How shallow does it have to be in order for a miniature to stand up without sliding or falling over? It's actually a remarkably shallow incline, which is kind of a nuisance. And then just working out some alternative like office block type buildings. These are actually based loosely on somebody else's ideas. Looking at warehouses, warehouse construction, elevations for flat office buildings, which is a development from this, and then side elevations, and working out how stairwells will fit in. And these I'm trying to push them up to sort of 3-story buildings, because one of the things that does bug me a bit, I started thinking about doing some big trees for dawn. If you just give me a moment, I'm just going to grab a tree so you can see some of the trees that I have made, or a couple of the trees that I've made and why I was thinking of making some trees for dawn. Okay, so these are some handmade trees. Clearly, can you see them? So I've got angle poise. If I move them back a bit, the info. No, can't really see them. Well, either way, if you look at this is sort of chunky trees. I've made kind of a mop cap. Okay. If you see these as like chunky trees, you have a mop cap. They are. I call them trees that you can hide behind because I get annoyed with model trees which you can't hide behind. So, look, you know, tuck them into the roots. They've got cover. Or actually put them directly behind, completely outside. So trees that you can actually hide behind. I handmade these. I might show the process at some point. And I've got two types. This is like a hard skin, and this is just like a soft skin. So this has just been. I used a brown flocked them. Light green spray paint spray over the top. So these are like a swampy finish one, slightly different finish in the foliage. I'm going to redo the foliage in the treetops at some point in the not too distant future because I want to seal that in using like a, I don't know, 1 part water, 1 part PVA, you know, sealy mix. But also I think I want to reflock them because I've seen some really great foliage flock out there. So yeah, these were just some beginning ideas for how would I make really big trees. Trees that you can put snipers in, trees that you can build, you can super jump into and such forth. So yeah, that's the first part, just coming up with ideas. Okay, just giving you a slightly better look at these trees, give you a sense of scale. They're not gigantic, I think they stand about 6.5 inches tall. Again, I might show the process of how to make these, and I'm going to redo them a bit, but yeah, just show you a bit clearly. Also, I'm just trying to burn out the battery in my camera. So these trees are, like I said, I made them because I just got a bit sick. Also, of like trees that are just really skinny. It's like if you go out there, there's big old trees. They're really huge, and nobody really makes trees like that. These are made out of blue insulating foam, and I think they've come out pretty well. I'm going for like a swampy look on this one. One on the right, I suppose. And I think I should put in sort of reed beds just around the edges. I mean, because if you go out in the wild and you look at trees directly beneath the tree canopy, normally around the base of a tree is just soil, bare soil, because nothing grows there because the tree kills everything. There's very little light gets there. Maybe under jungle circumstances you might find that there are specially evolved species as such, but in the case of this kind of tree. But to keep this swampy themed, I was going to put reeds around the edges, I think, in order to just give a bit of extra cover and start blending it out, and then make scatter pieces of terrain which mesh with that. They are just based on circular CDs. In hindsight, I'm not sure that's the best idea ever. Too regular, but then again, if I can break up the edges, maybe that's okay. And on this one, I was thinking about doing maybe some small shrubs around the edges. Again, I kind of want to make it so that it's feels like real terrain, but again, I don't want to block in around the base too much. Also, I don't want to interfere with being able to slot in miniatures, so if I sort of put in a shrub here, maybe some reeds just literally growing around the edges, maybe some smaller plants around the bases of shrubs, just to create a bit of ground cover and line breaking terrain. And the reason I was thinking about the bigger trees is I quite like something which is essentially the size of the foot of a CD. So if I had a taller tree, which you can't see in my hand, but if you had a tree which is sort of the trunk is finishing here, and then you've up above this you've got another bit of canopy, and then the trunk is the width of a CD at the base, and it sort of tapers in, so you've got that much line blocking, line of sight blocking And also if you could make it so it's elevation, so things like super jump could be used to jump into it. Maybe if I could build it in the right way so that anybody could jump into it, but they would have to follow a more particular route. Just to create some interest and to create a sort of Dawn / Paradiso kind of setting. I've also been thinking that for Dawn Paradiso I would like to build more sort of rocky terrain. In fact, I've just got a not just rocky terrain. In fact, but sorry, that was me going and picking stuff up, so I probably went very quiet. There's a rocky base, and it's like the tree growing out of the rocky base. This is one of the first ones I made. I spent longest on, so it probably looks better than all the others in all fairness. And as you can see, it's going to pan down again, but it looks like it's growing out of the rocks. And I thought that doing more like this, again, this is, I'm going to put this all in the same video, but it's, maybe plan what you're doing. Do test pieces. These technically are test pieces. If you are curious, the top's actually done with wire wool, or I've just teased it out, spray painted it, teased it into a shape, spray painted it, dipped it in flock. Pretty simple really, but I think it's pretty effective. It gives you nice line of sight blocking canopies, and it has, I don't know, it has a nice wispiness that I think when you buy what's it called? When you buy clump foliage, I always think that stuff's a bit too dense. It's like too lumpy. It doesn't quite feel right to me, and I quite like the wispiness of this. But maybe I'm biased because I put a lot of time in. I mean, I built 21 of these trees. Well, I finished 14. I've got another 4, which I ran out of flock. I haven't replaced it yet, and that's by the by. But I've got a whole woodland I can cover 4 foot by 4 foot in trees. It's probably a bit too much in all fairness. Square paper is really useful. It gives you can set the scale of a square like an inch, half an inch, quarter of an inch, 2 inches, depending on how big or what you're more interested in. So like I might do a 2 inches to a square if I'm working out a 4 foot by 4 foot, and I want to work out what actually fits in there. Once you've done all that and you've finished scribbling about, you move on to this, and so this is my sort of book of technical drawing, where I actually sit down and I do proper plans and elevations. I'm working pencil because pencil, believe it or not, is better than pen. It doesn't fade, whereas ink invariably fades sooner or later. The numbers that I've written down on this book down here, I've got all down here, and this is my conversion rates. So the first column is inches, second column is actual measurement in millimeters, and the third column is the dimension in millimeters that I am choosing to use as the measurement in inches, because I normally work out building sizes in inches in order to fit in with miniature scales. Because the other important thing about all of this, of course, is miniatures are all whacked out in terms of the scale of the base compared to the scale of a building. So coming back to what I was talking about earlier, I'm going to be doing these 2 inches deep. This is actual scale. This is a true scale drawing of how big the plan will be. If I grab a miniature, only guys have got painted and based at the moment. I place the miniature into a room and you can see immediately, look, there's enough depth. What you have to take into account in a 28mm scale is that what 28 times 2 is 56 mil is 12 feet. If you actually go around your own home and you look at the dimensions, unless you live in a particularly large home, you'll probably find that your average room is probably only about, well, I'm stood in a room which is, it's a pretty big room. It's for a house anyway. It's 15 feet by 10 feet roughly. So if 28mm is roughly 6 feet, then 56mm is roughly 12 feet, So that room's actually 12 feet wide by 18 feet long. So that's actually a really big room if it's those kind of dimensions. So although small, if you think of actual real scale compared to it, these are actually quite big rooms. Hence, like if I put in I don't know, if I had an ensuite, say, that came out this way, I mean, I don't know whether I'd be able to fit it in and actually fit a basin, because if I do this I really want to be able to fit miniatures into them. So I kind of ran out of space with these buildings. I might have to design some more thoughtfully planned ones, or maybe fit something in on the balcony. So taking into account base size is really important. You'll notice that all the stairwells are built so that even there's a midway stair there, which is a larger platform, so you've got somewhere easier to purchase, especially anything on the 45mm bases, because this is in fact, what's the width on that? Oh no, these stairwells are only designed for infantry. However, the balconies are big enough for larger troop types. I'm just going to grab a base so you can see. Okay, so you can just see that the base fits easily on the balcony. Now I'm just going to quickly flick through this to show you. Each floor has got its own ground plan. If the floor plan's identical, I just will mark at the top. I've got a scale saying that it's 1:1 scale. So these are all actual sizes. This is ground floors. You've got like parking bays. These are flats, and the walls across the middle, no doorways through. One flat, another flat. This also facilitates blocking line of sight, whilst giving you access to the entire building for placing miniatures. And the stairwells, like I say, these are built specifically for infantry. And then you have elevations, and I have all of the dimensions that I need to know in order to be able to work out the different pieces that make up this. And that's what's important about these elevations. This is worked out so that I can know how to map out these, and I'm getting accurate scales. But this is all a 1:2 because this building is quite large. Again, ground floor, first floor. This is the armory room. This has got like a balcony in it, so that you'll be able to reach in through windows through the balcony to get direct access to this, because I wanted buildings that you didn't have to actually take to pieces and remove floors from, that would provide line of sight blocking. This is like a wall in a higher story, so that you can't see, it'll block line of sight again. Roof, on top of this building there'll be the top of the roof. Then elevations, so you can see this is the ground floor, which is the armory room and the objective room. This is one of the broader size where you can see through. There'll be a bit that drops in here, which is shown here, which can be taken in and put in and taken out. And I'm going to build a separate stairway which can go outside, which will have car parking underneath it, and advertising signs, so there will be stuff that blocks line of sight through the building because of that. And then stairwells are a nightmare. You have to work them out really carefully, and in the case of this building, I'm building a lift shaft on the outside so that there'll be a lift. It'll come out and it'll slot in, and it'll be able to go in at each elevation. This also provides some additional line of sight blocking. Okay, so a couple of last things. One of the last things is when you do technical drawings like this, you'll notice that there's depth in the walls. This is the actual depth of the material, so I'm using a 3mm depth material. All measurements are worked out taking this into account, so whether it's plans or elevations. See, this was worked out using, I was thinking of maybe using some 1mm depth material, so I took that into account when I was designing this. Material that I'm actually using is going to be slightly different, so again, calculations will change according to circumstance. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of how to plan buildings. So I hope this has been of use to you guys. Take care everybody, and enjoy.